The governor is here for his 68th consecutive month since he took office. He started this in April of 2016 and has not missed a show. And there is a one line open if you'd like to grab it, and we'll take as many of you as we can as we move along in this hour. And there's much to catch up with the governor about, who's been a traveling person since the last program, and he's gone overseas, Glasgow, for the climate summit. How was that experience?
You know, Jim, it was a great experience, and I was able to go over there with leadership from Economic Development, DNR, as well as the Climate Initiatives Task Force. And really, I think, had a rewarding trip and was able to tell our story to much of the world in terms of us being ground zero in the United States for climate change and the adverse impacts as evidenced by coastal erosion, the increasing severity and frequency of storms, but also about how we are a great place to invest if you want to reduce the carbon footprint, engage in things like carbon capture and sequestration, wind energy, solar energy, hydrogen. And so we made the case and was able to visit with folks from the administration like John Kerry, Gina McCarthy, Jennifer Granholm, and others, but also able to interact with international leaders, including many from the UK and the First Minister of Scotland. And Scotland is positioned a lot like Louisiana, traditional oil and gas country in their case, a country within the UK. But they're engaged in a transition too, and their story looks a lot like ours. So we were comparing notes and trying to learn from one another. But it was a good trip, and I believe it will prove beneficial to our state.
And this week is Veterans Day. It started with Veterans Day, and you, of course, are a veteran. Thank you for your service. As we know, the governor is a graduate of West Point, and you have been to some ceremonies this week, and even for a seasoned veteran like you, they never cease to be touching.
Never. So we had a very good ceremony in Baton Rouge on Veterans Day at 11 o'clock. You know, the armistice was signed at the 11th hour of the 11th day, of the 11th hour of the 11th day, 11th month. And so at 11 o'clock this past Thursday, we had a ceremony. The Never Forget Garden, a rose garden, it's in the Veterans Memorial Park there beside the Capitol. People need to go see that. But that was dedicated on Thursday. And then had an opportunity to go to West Point, to my alma mater, for the weekend, and a suite. This is a big highlight for me. It's exciting. A suite in the Thayer Hotel. The only hotel on West Point was named for me, and I was able to go up there with my wife and kids, and a big number of my classmates traveled back for that. That was exciting. And then I went to Washington to lobby for more funding for hurricane relief. And while I was there on yesterday morning, I was able to lay a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier on a very beautiful day. They played taps, and we saw the changing of the guard, laid the wreath, and it was just a very touching moment for me because it sort of all comes home, just what these sacrifices by service members mean and how important they are. And we've had a great run these last few days.
That's remarkable. A suite named in honor of the governor of Louisiana. And as West Point goes, when you look back at these generals who are legendary, like George Patton, did he go to West Point? Of course he went to West Point. That's where generals win in the day. But there aren't as many politicians and elected governors. So congratulations on that.
And that's a conscious effort that they're making to try to show a connection in West Point to leadership generally. But the vast majority are people like MacArthur, Patton, Omar Bradley. I mean, you
go down the list.
Buzz Aldrin. You just go down the list, right?
Well, 877-217-5757, and we will go to the phone lines in just a moment. In Washington this week, where you were, the infrastructure measure, over $1 trillion that will be spread throughout the country for rail and bridges and highways and broadband. And former mayor of New Orleans and former Lieutenant Governor Mitch Landrieu has been put in charge by the president, Joe Biden. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I supported the infrastructure bill from its conception. And this is the first time in a generation that Congress has passed an infrastructure bill. It is very heavy on traditional infrastructure. So we're going to get about $6 billion over the next 5 years, in addition to what we would have ordinarily gotten for things like roads, bridges, ports, airports. and there will be more money available for us, but you're going to have to undergo a competitive process to win grants based on criteria that we haven't yet seen. But it's not just about that. It's high-speed broadband. So we're going to get at least another $100 million on that for rural broadband across the state. But there's an opportunity to get several hundred million more once the FCC finishes mapping the country to determine where there are serious gaps in access to high-speed, quality, affordable broadband. Once they make that determination, which we think that'll be done in about a year, we could get more money. And there's money there to cap orphaned oil wells, and we have way more than our fair share of those in Louisiana, oil and gas wells that have been abandoned and not capped. There's money there for resiliency through CPRA, things that DEQ can do to clean up toxic sites and engage in brownfields work. And so there are tremendous opportunities. The rules are still being written, but this is going to be good for our state.
And 4 amendments were on the ballot this past Saturday. Unfortunately, turnout in the state of only, I think, 13.7% of the voters, registered voters, but 3 of them failed. But the one that you held most near and dear, that you really believed in, it passed.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt of the 4. And look, I was openly supportive of Amendments 1 and 2. Amendment 1 would have created a streamlined sales tax collection in Louisiana at the state level, and it did not pass. I think that's regrettable. But the most important one of the day did, and that is Amendment 2, where we're going to trade off a deduction that almost no other state has in exchange for lower rates. So it's going to be revenue neutral overall. But we really take charge of our own destiny. So the Congress won't decide for us what our revenue is going to be when they raise and lower taxes.
Let's see if we can go to Piper now. Piper, good afternoon to you.
Hi there. I'm Piper Hutchinson with the Manship State House Bureau. Governor Edwards, we have not heard much from you on the topic of redistricting. Could you tell us a little bit about your thoughts and when you think when it's appropriate for you to use your veto?
Well, first of all, Piper, thank you very much for calling in. It is a great question. So obviously the census was done in 2020. The data came out, I think, in usable form September the 15th. There will be a redistricting session of the legislature, a special session in the month of February. And given the census and where people live and the numbers, obviously a number of districts have to be revised. And so you're going to see that effort. Everything from the Louisiana Senate and the Louisiana House, Public Service Commission, Bessie, you name it. The central premise that I work under, and I've said this many times, Piper, is we need to have a fair system where the map is not configured in a way that just befuddles people, but that it makes some sense. And we want a fair map so that the voter has a reasonable chance of choosing their representatives rather than representatives choosing their voters. And obviously, you as governor, you hope that you can work with the legislature and others to create legislation that doesn't need to be vetoed. That is always an option. And so I will veto bills that I believe suffer from defects in terms of just basic fairness. And we want to make sure that we don't have packing and cracking, and those are terms of art. But we'll be working with all of the folks in the legislature in order to make sure that we can accomplish that.
Governor, in the past on this show, I believe you have expressed your admiration, if you will, for the former governor of Virginia, Terry McAuliffe, and he was trying to get his job back and lost by 2.5 points 15 days ago. Was that a surprise?
Well, it was disappointing to me because Terry is a personal friend. I can't say that I was surprised because the last 30 days it was fairly consistent movement and momentum on the other side of that race. And when that's happening, if you're the person ahead in the polls, but you're losing momentum, you're wanting that election day to come as soon as possible. So I cannot say that I was surprised. And quite frankly, historically, shouldn't be terribly surprised because we have a history where in the midterms, the voters way more often than not independent voters are really the ones who do this. They will turn away from the party in power, and in this case, with President Biden being in the White House and Terry McAuliffe being a Democrat, not terribly surprised, but disappointed because he is a friend, and as far as I could tell, he did an excellent job as governor of Virginia when he served.
And like you, is thought to be a, quote, centrist Democrat.
Well, yeah, and he always had a lot of support among Republicans, but especially in the business community, a very pro-business approach to governing. Yesterday,
by the way, was the 30th anniversary of the so-called race from hell, the election between Edwin Edwards and David Duke. I was thinking you were 25 years old then. I don't even think you were living in Louisiana. You were probably stationed somewhere by that time, maybe in Hawaii. Do you recall that election?
I was in Hawaii. By the way, it was the second anniversary of my reelection too.
That's true. That is exactly right.
but the 30th anniversary, yes, I was in Hawaii, and so I didn't have a great feel for what was happening on the ground and what people were saying. I remember speaking to my father on the phone, and he telling me that he felt very confident that Edwin Edwards would win, and that ultimately the people of Louisiana just would not, in the numbers needed, embrace someone like David Duke with what he stood for in his past and so forth. And certainly I was very gratified when the results came in, and that proved to be the case. And, you know, I still look at that race, and I'm very, very thankful that we didn't go down that road because that would have tarnished our state, I think, more than anything that could have possibly happened then or now.
877-217-5757 for Governor John Bel Edwards. John in Covington. John, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor.
Governor, given that the last couple of hurricanes have destroyed some 300 square miles of wetlands, and given that the CPRA diversions expect to build only 40 square miles of wetlands, would you support Reef Programming those funds for more efficient storm protection? Thank you.
John, thank you very much for the call. First of all, we support restoration and protection projects that are based on science. And that includes the diversion projects, both Mid-Breton, Mid-Barataria, the east and west sides of the Mississippi River. And the premise of the diversions is fairly unremarkable. We've lost 2,000 square miles of wetlands since 1930 because we leveed the river, and sediment has been disconnected from the marsh, and therefore it became open water over time. And this is an effort to reconnect river sediment with the marsh when it is appropriate to do so, meaning when you have lots of sediment being carried in the water. But there are other things that we can do as well. And one of the things that we are gratified about, the restoration and protection projects that we have undertaken held up extremely well and performed very well, even with Hurricane Ida, tied for the strongest hurricane to ever make landfall in our state. And the path that it took was one that potentially could have damaged those protection and restoration programs unlike anything we had seen before. But that didn't happen. And so we're very thankful. And certainly we're going to continue to support a science-based approach. And I do want to very quickly mention that my appreciation, that of the entire state, should go out to King Milling. He resigned his position on the CPRA board and also as chair of the advisory council. But from the inception of the efforts in Louisiana to engage in restoration and protection, he's been there and really we have the most robust and active climate adaptation program anywhere in the country today. And in many respects, he was an architect of that, and I just want to thank him for his tireless efforts, and they have been tremendous for the state of Louisiana.
James in Longview, Texas. I believe, James.
Well, good afternoon, Governor, and good afternoon, Jim. I just wanted to ask you 2 points. I just want to get your comments on a Never Forget Garden blooming, and also the UK summit on climate change in Scotland. You touched on it, but would you touch on the topic of wood pellets and how they relate to Louisiana and even my state of Texas?
Well, thank you. So, James, good to hear from you again. The Never Forget Garden, it is new. It is a new addition to the Veterans Memorial Park that's run by the Louisiana Department of Veterans Affairs. This is the old Arsenal Park right on the east side of the state capitol. And the theme of that is very consistent with the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. We should never, ever forget those who served, and especially those who made the ultimate sacrifice. I encourage everybody to go by and look at that. And there are other monuments there as well. It's a beautiful, beautiful park. Secondly, with respect to Scotland and wood pellets, Louisiana is already engaged in this process because Drax has 4 locations in Louisiana. Their headquarters, they have an operation in Baton Rouge for export at the port here, but they have in LaSalle Parish and in Morehouse Parish, they have operations to take what would otherwise be wood waste, make that into pellets, send it to the UK to be burned for power generation. And so I actually, on my way to Scotland, stopped at the Drax facility just outside of York in the UK. And they replaced the largest coal-powered electricity generating unit in Europe with wood pellets and greatly reduced reliance upon coal. And that now they're engaged in efforts to implement carbon capture and sequestration at that facility as well. And because we have so much fiber in Louisiana, and because we so well manage our farmland, our forests, meaning that we plant more trees than we harvest, this is sustainable. And it's something that we should look at as potentially a way to move away from fossil fuels and power generation, even here in Louisiana.
Kent in Marrero. Kent, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor with
Good afternoon,
Governor Edwards.
Hi, Kent. Thank you for calling.
Hey, listen, all your essential workers work for wages. We pay federal taxes that are taken out of our paychecks. So next year you're telling us we can't deduct these federal taxes from your state return?
Whenever it's implemented, and I don't remember, that is the general premise of what we did. But by the way, we reduced the tax rates to make that revenue neutral. So at the end of the day,
let's make a deal. Let's make a deal. Is that what we're doing here? I don't know what's going on. I just know I'm not going to be able to deduct my federal taxes from the state form.
Yeah, but I want you to understand, Kent, the way this architecture worked on this plan is that the the income tax rates for both corporations and individuals was reduced in order to offset the amount that you can no longer deduct. So tax bills are not going to be higher, but we're just going to have control over what the revenues are going to be, as opposed to ceding that to Congress, who on occasion will either raise or lower taxes. And every time that happens, it impacts what we collect here in Louisiana, even though we didn't make a change. And that's why I think it was the right thing to do. And by the way, that was a deduction, if I'm not mistaken, only 1 or 2 other states actually had, because it just isn't good tax policy.
Ezra in New Orleans. Hello, Ezra. You're on Ask the Governor.
Hi, Mr. Governor. Hey, how y'all doing? First of all, congrats on the 2-year anniversary of your election. But my question was actually about elections. We got like 13% turnout in the recent amendment vote we just had there. And for a lot of folks, it's real difficult to vote on a Saturday. Our Jewish and Seventh-day Adventist friends, and, early voting ending before Election Day makes it really difficult for folks to vote. So I don't know if you had any ideas on how we can resolve this issue, extending early voting, mail-in voting, even changing the voting day from Saturday potentially.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ezra. And of course, I believe that we should do everything we can within reason to make it easier for people to vote. We now have a number of days of early voting. It's a full 7 days. It's a Saturday, followed by Monday through Friday, and another Saturday. And for presidential elections going forward, there will be 3 additional days of early voting on top of that. Mail-in voting is available for those who qualify as well. And then as to whether you have elections on Saturday or Tuesday, and Tuesday is when most states have their elections, but Tuesday is often also a work day. And so if you're trying to make it more convenient for people to vote, do you do that? If you change your elections from Saturday to Tuesday, I think you probably make it harder for more people to vote. And we do vote on Tuesdays in federal elections, as they're called. But But Ezra, I think I'm in agreement with your overall stated concern, and that is that we should encourage people to vote. We should make it as easy as possible and give them multiple ways to vote, and so long as we can make sure that we can have confidence in the results.
Before we go back to the phone lines, significant action last week by the was a pardon board, parole board. Okay, it was a pardon. The pardon board made a decision regarding Homer Plessy, and we're going back now to the 19th century, but obviously long overdue.
Yeah, and this is the first.
Alondra, can you turn his microphone up, please?
This is the first posthumous pardon awarded by the pardon board under the Avery Alexander pardon law. And so on Friday, the pardon board approved it. It will come to me at some point in the near future for my signature, and certainly I'm going to sign it. But we're looking for an appropriate way to do this. This is so historically significant. And there are family members of both Homer Plessy and Ferguson in the New Orleans area. And so we're going to try to set that up just as soon as we possibly can. But I didn't want this to be a signature that I just provided sitting in my desk without all of these people being able to participate and us drawing proper attention to just how historic this is to, take away that conviction for something that should have obviously never, ever been a crime.
Leslie in New Orleans. Good afternoon, Leslie. You're on with Governor Edwards. Hi, Leslie. Good afternoon, Leslie.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Leslie, we can get you.
Oh, hey. Yeah, so I'm a paramedic in New Orleans, and I was wondering what your thoughts about the state supplemental pay for EMS might be. So for those of you who don't know, like the viewers, the fire department and the police department, they both get $500 a month from the state, but EMS is not included in that. So I was wondering, Governor Edwards, if you might support a movement to get EMS that same pay that the other first responders do.
Yeah, well, thank you, Leslie. And by the way, thank you for being a paramedic in New Orleans. And I know how busy you all have been, especially over the last 22 months or so with COVID. So there's a supplemental pay program where for post-certified law enforcement officers and for fire department personnel who've engaged in certain training requirements and satisfied those, that they can qualify for $500 a month from the state. Obviously, before I can commit to expanding that beyond fire and police, or I should say fire and law enforcement, because it's sheriff's deputies too, would need to know how many, what training requirements, certification requirements we would want to make sure that people participated in and that sort of thing. But really what that cost would be as well. I know that the purpose initially of supplemental pay was for a certain subset of first responders and not all first responders. But I understand your position and what your views are on it. But I can't commit on this program today to supporting that. I need to know more information.
Devin in New Orleans. Hi, Devin. You're on the air with the governor.
Hello, Mr. Governor.
Hi, Devin.
I have an idea that I think would be really helpful for South Louisiana. I'm in New Orleans, and my house has solar panels and 2 batteries. No power for 10 days. I was actually able to take care of my neighbors, to give people ice water, to power somebody's oxygen machine. I run a nonprofit in New Orleans called Feed the Second Line. I also got phone calls from restaurants asking if I could help them distribute the food that was rotting in their coolers, because with no power, there's all that food waste. A restaurant can easily have $10,000 of food in their walk-in cooler, and when the power goes out, that gets thrown away. It causes a bunch of methane. And at the same time, people are going hungry because it's after a major hurricane and supply chains are messed up and food distribution is very difficult. So basically, if we just get solar panels and batteries on restaurants in South Louisiana, they can become a cooling center, a phone charging center, a food distribution center.
Devin, first of all, thank you for the call. Secondly, thank you for taking care of your neighbors. And you're not the only one that benefited from solar panels and batteries. And so we actually have housing complex in New Orleans that was built recently with a microgrid, and it never lost power either. And it was probably the largest area, although it was small, in New Orleans that did not lose power. And so your point is well taken. Obviously, it's something that we could potentially work with the Louisiana Restaurant Association. They can gauge the interest in their members in doing this sort of thing. But the opportunity that they would have to stay open and preserve food and all of that would obviously be very helpful, because one of the first things that happens when the power goes out is you very quickly have to start distributing food and water to individuals so that they have what they need to subsist.
Jessica in Baton Rouge. Jessica, good afternoon. You're on the air.
Hello, Governor. My question is, with Joe Biden's new infrastructure bill, what measures are going to be done to improve the infrastructure in New Orleans following the recent hurricanes, as far as maybe burying power lines or increasing the use of solar panels?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think across the state and across the country, to include in New Orleans, you're going to see more and more solar over time. You're going to see more and more wind energy. And in fact, in the next year or so, maybe slightly longer, I think you're going to see a wind lease sale in the Gulf of Mexico, much like I think BOEM's doing one today for oil and gas in the Gulf. So you're going to see many more opportunities like that. And look, we have an idea of the total amount of money that Congress is investing in each area, exactly how that's going to come to Louisiana, and whether it comes pursuant to a formula or is it going to be a discretionary grant that we have to compete for, what that timeline is going to look like, and what the rules are going to be on it. And we don't know those things yet. So it's a little premature for me to say exactly how a specific area in Louisiana is going to benefit with respect to solar. But what I can tell you is we're all going to benefit from all of these efforts over time. And without this bill passing, certainly we wouldn't have anything to discuss. And it's going to be very helpful, quite frankly, that Mitch Landrieu, New Orleans native and former mayor, someone from Louisiana who already knows the challenges here, will be the face of the administration when it comes. And I think they're calling him the infrastructure czar. I might have that title slightly off. But to have someone who's familiar with Louisiana, with New Orleans, with all of the needs and the opportunities, I think is going to prove helpful over time.
Let's go to Bill in Baton Rouge. Bill, calling from downtown Baton Rouge. You're on with Governor Edwards.
Hello. Louisiana is sort of behind on making state buildings and facilities accessible to the disabled. And I was wondering if, and we're talking about places like the Capitol, the Claiborne building, and many buildings downtown. I was wondering if there's any money in the infrastructure bill that is either earmarked for those purposes or might be dedicated by the state.
Bill, I have to profess ignorance. I'm not aware of anything in the bills, and it may be there with respect to ADA compliance. I do know that we have budget items, and particularly in the capital outlay program every year to make state buildings ADA compliant. And of course, it's never enough to get it all done at one time. But we try to bite off as much as we can chew over time, and it is something we recognize that we absolutely need to do. But as to whether that's a feature of the Infrastructure Act, I just am not. I'm not aware of that right now.
877-217-5757, a line open for the first time in a while, if you'd like to grab it. Kevin in New Orleans. Kevin, you're on with Governor Edwards. Hi, Kevin.
Good afternoon, Governor. Thank you for taking my call.
Hi, Kevin. Good to have you.
So, in regards to the Build Back Better bill that has just passed the United States Congress, and the renewed focus on reducing climate change from the UN summit, it seems that Louisiana is fairly uniquely positioned with our large shipbuilding and maritime transportation capacities and the capacity to supply equipment and install it across the Gulf South in the country. Is there any talk going on between the state government and private enterprise in this, or is it still a little too early for such discussions?
And Kevin, I assume you're talking about wind energy?
Yes, for
Okay.
wind energy and, developing seabed wave power generation and
Yes.
some other emerging technologies like that. We seem to have a lot of the right people and the right infrastructure to make that happen.
Yeah, no, Kevin, that's exactly right. That's one of the principal reasons that I went to Scotland. And by the way, it's not just theoretical. It's actually happened. The Block Island wind farm off of Rhode Island, the first large-scale wind farm in that part of the country, was put in place with several companies and hundreds of individual employees from Louisiana. Because if you can fabricate an offshore oil platform, you can fabricate an offshore wind platform, and you can service them with our vessels. And those skills are transferable. And that's why we're so uniquely positioned to take advantage of it.
And Governor John Bel Edwards, 20 months ago yesterday, hard to believe that so much has happened in a year and 8 months, but 20 years ago yesterday, you issued your first stay-at-home order for COVID, and we've gone through 3/4 of a show without talking about it. Does that mean we're in the clear, or do we still have work to do?
Well, it means we're doing better. Certainly, we remain in a pandemic and in a public health emergency, but we're doing better, and in some ways that are quantifiable, better than we've done since the very beginning of the public health emergency. So we actually have less than 200 people in the hospital today with COVID-19, and that's lower than at any point since we started reporting hospitalization numbers. We're very thankful. Less than 2% of all the tests we're administering are coming back positive. That's great. But at the same time, we have not had a single day since about March the 13th of 2020 when we didn't report a death. Today we're reporting 19 deaths, and we're getting very close to 15,000 deaths overall from COVID-19 here in Louisiana. So the pandemic continues. We are doing better. We've got safe and effective vaccines out there. We know we're coming up on holiday time, Thanksgiving next week, Christmas right around the corner, and New Year's and so forth. We know people are going to travel and gather. Last year when this happened, there was a big surge. There's no reason to have a big surge because of multiple reasons. Now people have had an opportunity to be vaccinated. They know how to do things safely if they choose to do that. And we have the experience of what happened last year, so we know how important it is to do it. In order to make that a little bit easier to occur, today the Department of Health announced that anyone 18 and older can get a booster shot. And we're doing the mix and match if necessary, if that's what you want to do. But if you're more than 6 months since being vaccinated with Pfizer or Moderna, you're eligible for a booster if you're 18 or older. If you're more than 2 months out from a Johnson & Johnson vaccination, you're eligible for a booster because we know that the effectiveness of these vaccines wane over time. We know we still have COVID transmitting in our communities. And so we're encouraging people to go out and get your boosters as soon as you're able to do that. To increase the potency of the immunities that the vaccine confers on individuals, and then you can feel better about the holidays as well. But please be safe. Understand that people are going to be traveling, gathering in large numbers. Anything outdoors is safer than indoors, and that we should be very, very careful, especially when we're gathering with people who, by their age or physical health condition, I should say, renders them more vulnerable to the disease.
I see that LSU has dropped the mask mandate at the major campus, the flagship university, and it was an about face. Are you satisfied that was the right course?
Yeah, I am. And they did it at the right time and following the right procedure. I mean, they have a medical advisory panel that they rely upon. Transmission rates were low. They check through wastewater and other means to see what transmission looks like on campus. They have a really good idea of the percentage of faculty, staff, students who are vaccinated. And so I have confidence that President Tate and the folks at LSU did the right thing, and they did it at the right time. I mean, there's a season for everything. You just have to get to the right place. And I think that's reflective that we're doing better overall as it relates to COVID. But sometimes people hear that and they think it's over. There are people still in the hospital. There are still people dying, but we are doing better. And I'm very thankful for that. But I am mindful that we still have a ways to go.
And LSU is getting headlines for hiring a new football coach. Previous governors of this state and others would be right in the middle of that. doesn't appear you are. Are you aware of what's going on, though?
Well, I'm aware of what you're aware of, assuming you're getting your news from the Advocate and from other sources like that. But no, I appoint a board to LSU, and they pick a president, and we have an athletic director. It really is the athletic director's decision. I know Scott Woodward. I have tremendous confidence in him. I believe that he will make a decision that's going to be in the best interest of the football program and of the University of the state. I am a tremendous fan. I think you know that. It hurts me to lose, and I'm looking forward to making sure that we get back into winning form just as soon as possible.
I don't think there's any doubt you're the biggest fan in the governor's office since John McKithen. And, of course, if he had been in office, he probably would have been involved. But he later became a board member and was intricately involved in hiring and firing of coaches. When you leave office, would you be interested in being like on the LSU board? Would that be something that would appeal to you?
Certainly. Look, I'm a graduate of the LSU Law School. I believe in the flagship university and that system and what it means for our state. And so if that were ever offered to me, I can assure you that I would accept that, and I would be honored to do it. It won't be something that I'll be lobbying for and that sort of thing. But if it came my way, I would be pleased to serve.
Are you moving back to Tangipahoa Parish?
Yeah, Donna and I intend to move back to Roseland, to our home, and we're sort of excited about that. And of course, that's still a little over 2 years from now. An awful lot of work to do. And by the way, we have more opportunities than we've had in so long to address things that need to be addressed. So we've righted the fiscal ship of the state. We have a surplus. We have ARP funds that remain. We now have infrastructure funds that are available to a degree that we haven't had them in a generation. We still have lots of challenges in our state where we're trying to recover from multiple hurricanes, 5 hurricanes in the last 2 years, and multiple floods and other disasters, all during a pandemic. So there's plenty of work to keep me fully engaged and occupied between now and January of 2024. But when that day comes, we will be going back to Tangipahoa Parish.
And when other governors have left office, some have chosen to get involved in other races, perhaps either endorse or go against somebody who's vying to be their successor. Will you do that?
Well, I mean, I guess it's possible. I won't shy away from it if I think that there's clearly a candidate who is superior and would do best for Louisiana. And conversely, if there's a candidate who is clearly a danger to our state, in my estimation, then I would feel a sense of obligation to make my views known and to see if I could do something to derail that candidate.
And I'm sure that of those testing the waters, and there are many testing the waters right now, including at least three statewide officials, you have some that probably you would prefer more than others.
Oh, but certainly, and I think we all do. But look, it's still very early, and as you know, about 5 times as many people talk about running as actually run. So it's still way too early to engage in any real speculation and start any talk. But I'll be paying attention, and at the right time, if the situation, in my estimation, warrants it, you'll hear from me.
Yeah, well, I remember in 2003, for example, John Kennedy was treasurer. He was running for governor, and then when Bobby Jindal got in, he got out and ran for treasurer. We might see some of that happen again. But one person who never changed his mind was John Bell Edwards in 2015, and there were those who were trying to coax you to get out of that race, weren't there?
There were, and I think because of the election cycle the year before, when Senator Landrieu lost, there was this general idea that well, if Senator Landrieu, an incumbent, powerful incumbent senator, lost, then maybe we just need to focus on electing the most moderate among the Republicans, and of course that wasn't my view. Obviously, I'm glad that I stayed in the race, and I don't believe that the people that were approaching me and saying, "Look, you shouldn't run," I never took that as being anti-me. I think they were acting in what they thought was in the best interest of the state, not because they didn't want me to be governor, but because they thought I couldn't be, but I might set up a path for the least desirable candidate, who for them at least, and for me, quite frankly, was Senator Vitter. But that wasn't my estimation. I always believed that I could win, and certainly I'm sitting here because we did.
Yeah, and you did. We had 56% of the votes, but the last one was much closer.
It was closer, but probably at least as meaningful to me. If you think about it, in the state of Louisiana, when Obama was president and at the height of his unpopularity, I won. 4 years later, when Trump was president and the height of his popularity here, and he came 3 times to campaign against me, I won. Right. So each of those campaigns I think are remarkable, and I think they validate what I believed all along about the people of Louisiana. Much more moderate than most people realize, and when it comes to a governor, they want somebody who is moderate too, who is going to go in and do the work and get things done. And I believe that's how we were able to connect and to win.
Well, yeah, I think will go down, particularly in these times, as a deep South governor who defeated 2 Republicans who were both well-financed and, as you say, heavily supported, one by an incumbent president. You won twice. A listener noted, and it's worth mentioning, the mayor of New Orleans, of course, has been under fire for COVID and for other matters, but you talk about a vote getter. She got 65% of the votes in a 14-person field.
Against the field. And look, maybe her policies would not have been as supported elsewhere in the state, but she's only the mayor of New Orleans, right? That's the city that she governs, and the people there are very satisfied with her leadership on COVID and other matters. And so, I think that speaks for itself. 65% against the field in the primary.
A big field.
Yeah. And some people will say, but she didn't have a credible challenger. Well, that too speaks to the job that she's done as well.
Well, Governor, thank you. We'll be back again next month, 3rd Wednesday of December. Until then, thanks for listening and stay tuned.
Thank you.